Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Urquhart. I'm a research assistant and I support the collaboration between the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto and the Toronto District School Board. So today I'm joined in the Zoom room by some of my colleagues from the team from the Sustainability Office, Alicia Roberge, Chris Metropolis, and Jen Vetter. And I also work alongside Dr. Hilary Inwood, who's not able to join us today, but she's affiliated with OISE, and she and I work to support this collaboration with the TDSB. So thank you so much for joining on this very rainy spring Thursday. We know it's a really busy time in the school year, so thank you for those of you who've chosen to join, either here in the Zoom room today or who might be watching this later. Thanks for your time. I am going to start a quick poll just so you can tell us a little bit about who you are. So if you can take a moment to fill that out. If you do have questions, we're planning for 10 minutes or so towards the end of our time for a little bit of Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can hang on to those or you can put them in the chat. So for our agenda today, Alicia, if you can go to the next slide. We are going to be sharing a little bit about some of the actions that have come out of Climate Camp. So we have a few people who are going to be speaking today. First, we'll hear from Maria Vamvalis, who's going to share a little bit about Climate Camp overall and some of the principles that guide that particular professional learning experience. And then we have 3 TDSB teachers who are going to share. And we'll hear a little bit about some of the climate-related learning that's happening in their classrooms. And they span grade 1 all the way up to secondary. So we'll be hearing a range of different experiences today. So I do want to start with a land acknowledgement. And I want to do this by introducing you on the next slide, Alicia, to an educator and artist. Her name is formerly Jamie Coble, but Jamie Morse. And this is an artist and educator who is originally a Métis Cree artist, an educator originally from northern Alberta, from Buffalo Lake Métis settlement, which is near Lac La Biche. And this is an artist that I was introduced to recently because I was visiting a school and I was seeing a project that students were involved in called Superhero Plant Trading Cards. And they were designing these trading cards. This project invites children to connect to nature through Indigenous knowledge and eco-art. They give these traditional plants superhero traits, so things like healing and protection. The students learn about the role of plants in ecosystems and their cultural traditions and their potential for climate resilience. So I'll share a link to this initiative, but it was something that the teacher that I was observing was introducing to their class. So I see this as an example of how students are engaged in learning that makes local traditional ecological knowledge relevant to students. And it's rooted, literally and figuratively in the land. So with that reminder, for myself and others that are joining today, this webinar from Toronto, we want to acknowledge that we are here hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. And we also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So if you're joining from other places today, please feel free to acknowledge the traditional territories that you're joining from. You can add that into the chat. So for today's webinar, Springing into Climate Action is to hear stories of climate change education that teachers in the Toronto District School Board have implemented this year because of their involvement in professional learning. Specifically, the 3 teachers that are joining today were part of the first ever climate camp, which was hosted last August at Monocliffs Education Center. And they were also part of the Climate Literacy and Leadership Program. So before we hear from our TDSB teachers, I want to welcome Dr. Maria Vamvalis to give an overview of Climate Camp. Maria is an educator, researcher, and facilitator who brings over 15 years of experience in education to her work. And her recent doctoral research at OISE introduced holistic climate justice pedagogies, a generative framework that weaves together youth, well-being, ecological relationality, and systemic transformation. And she's also the founder of IANENSI, sorry, Maria, I mispronounced that. Aina Yanisi, a field of practice for regenerative work at the intersection of climate, culture, and consciousness. So I've had the chance to get to know Maria a little bit through this work, and I've been so impressed with the work that she's been doing, and she's been so instrumental in planning climate camp and the experiences for teachers there. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Maria, to share a little bit about the principles that guide the experience.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and welcome everyone. It's great to be with you. I'm happy to share a little bit about the underlying principles of climate camp, how it's been created. I want to leave most of the time for the teachers who are part of the camp so that we hear from them. But just to give you an overview, when we were designing climate camp, let me just start with my own experience as an educator, because some of the research that I've done really stems from that. And having been a teacher really since the early 2000s, I had a question at that time, which was, how do I teach about climate change and knowing about the realities of what's happening in our world to our environment in ways that will support the psycho-emotional and psycho-spiritual well-being of learners? So this has been a long inquiry to think about how we're going to do this work in times that are very complex and challenging. So when we're thinking about professional learning for climate change, we really wanted this to be something that nourished teachers and inspires them, where we're in nature. And through the partnership of the Sustainability Office at TDSB and the Urban Indigenous Education Center, as well at TDSB, through that partnership, really building on the incredible work that's being done within the board. So we wanted to be in nature, and the Monoclis Outdoor Education Center is the place that we've held climate camp. It's a gorgeous setting. If you haven't been there, it's absolutely beautiful. It's ancient forests and rock faces, and there's cliffs, and it's quite beautiful. We wanted to really build community for teachers across the board who are committed to this work, to build knowledge in climate change education and also climate justice education, and in ways that address the climate emotions. I'd imagine if I asked anybody in this group if you've experienced any fear or anxiety or distress about the state of the environment, I would imagine that probably everyone in this space is grappling with those feelings. And so we want to make those not something that's separate from, but very much a part of the way in which we're educating and the work we're doing. And of course, critical to the climate crisis is paradigms of extraction and paradigms of supremacy and erasing, distinct Indigenous knowledge systems that have held reverence for our interrelatedness with ecosystems, the fact that we are nature. And all of this has been really important to the approach that we've taken. So in the climate camp last year, we were lucky. We had 33 highly motivated TDSB teachers, 3 administrators, 18 graduate students from OISE, and also the organizing team. So we had a fantastic group who really set the stage for our first climate camp. Moving to the next slide, I wanted to share that, in designing the program, we really were thinking of ways that we can center Indigenous voice and perspectives and knowledge as being really central, not peripheral, but really central to the camp. And so we were very fortunate to have Dr. Dan Longboat. Some of you may be familiar with him. He is one of the founders of the Indigenous Education Studies program at Trent, and he was our keynote. We've had diverse workshops that we're offering again this year on holistic climate literacy, on truth and reconciliation in education, nature-based learning, integrating arts and storytelling, all of these really holistic dimensions of climate change education that then teachers were provided with opportunities to think about how they were going to engage that in their own practice, and for administrators, how they were going to do that within their own context and how it would shape their leadership. So this was woven throughout, that you were in cohorts at the climate camp, and this is a group that you would return to and work towards a culminating activity that was shared as part of the camp. Moving to the next slide. I just want to say a little bit, not too much, about the framework that comes from my own doctoral research. to share that we're really thinking about ways to engage this work that weaves together teaching about climate injustice and ecological injustice, taking action and engaging in different forms of advocacy and activism, and also thinking about an often forgotten part of those pedagogies of relational well-being. And that's about our connectedness with each other, our relationships with each other, with ourselves, and also our relationships with ecosystems. But if we really want to go deep and recognize that we're doing the work of systems transformation, it's never been more clear that we have to change our systems. They're unsustainable, they're extractive, they're violent, they are not creating flourishing for the majority of life on this planet, and we have to be part of that change. And so as we deepen in this work, we want to deepen our interconnectedness. We want to be rooted in relationships of love and compassion and peace and name those things clearly as part of our values. We want to engage in action that's regenerative, that actually restores ecosystems, restores relationships, restores the health of life around us. And we want to be doing this in ways that is increasing systemic justice and equity. And that work is really the complex decolonizing work that we see as part of holistic climate justice education. And so the program was rooted on continuing to deepen our understanding of these principles and doing the work in this way. Next slide. And, you can see from these images, it was quite an interactive experience. There's campfires, there's sing-alongs. We had a dance party by the campfire. We had beautiful nature walks on the land. We engaged in learning outdoors. We engaged in art space activities. There was connections between people and I think relationships that have extended beyond the life of climate camp. So it's a kind of experience that while we're dealing with something we know is very complex and challenging, it's also a space where you are not experiencing this alone. We're coming together as educators to actually create the possibilities with our learners and in our communities of holding on to that vision of creating a more beautiful world. And that's really at the heart of Climate Camp and the programming. And I'm really excited to hear from the teachers about how this experience has informed the work that they've done this year. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. That was a really nice overview of the experience. And I think it does capture it well. Like it's really a time to dig into some of these really big, complex ideas, but also to do so in solidarity with other teachers. Now we're going to transition. We're going to hear from 3 TDSB teachers to share a little bit about their key learning from Climate Camp and how they're bringing climate change education into their classrooms. So first up, we're going to hear from Trish Babits. Trish is an educator, a mother, a grandmother, and Trish believes that we are all keepers of the earth. We pass on our history to future generations. So as an educator, Trish walks with her students and colleagues to create a path for change. So Trish, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've been doing with, I believe, your grade 1 students.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. I want to first acknowledge everyone who's supported this work for so many years. I think I began teaching 30 years ago, and to see the transformation, it's really a privilege to be a part of it. Can everyone hear me okay? It's good? Yeah, okay. So I wanted to say that Climate Camp provided really overall nourishment. And I think we think about nature, we work with I work with grade 1s, young children. And if we think about the earth as a baby that we need to take care of and nurture, we do the same with children. And so Climate Camp, I'm a bit emotional because that's me, but it was a really awesome experience. So it helped to frame, reframe, reimagine, and reimage. It allowed for me to, and I think a lot of educators, to unsilo and to connect with other colleagues. I left with a toolkit that I was able to bring back right coming into my this school year, which was fantastic, being able to be re-energized. And we laughed a lot at the camp and had a great time. It created a space, being a part of the camp created a space within to have the courage to protect time and space for climate education in my classroom. This being away for a few days from a busy life also provided self-care, taking a few days out of my life to recharge through learning, laughter, and connection. And really it allowed the TDSB and OISE, they value this work and they have supported this work in many ways over the years. This is another opportunity for us to rethink and reimagine and reconnect with people that are going to support you to continue. This is hard work. So it also provided a sense of value to the work that we do, and that also confirmed we are not alone. Next slide, please. I'm part of the action research at OISE. So as part of reconnecting, I reconnected with Hillary and other colleagues and shared with Hillary what I'd been doing I took the AQ courses, so I have my specialist in environmental education through the generosity of TDSB as well. And so I have all three parts and have taken them over the years, which has also supported this work and worked with the Urban Indigenous Education Center. So I shared with her different projects that I'm doing today. And then she invited me to come in to do the action research at OISE. So my initial question was, how can I teach my primary students to use textile mapping to develop connection to their place on the land? By doing this, I learned to think deeply and purposefully about the work I do with my students. Parents and community members are involved, including my administration, and also extended out. And I'll share a little bit more about that. We're using materials in textile mapping that pollutes and toxifies the earth. So rethinking the materials that would end up in a landfill to recreate it and reimagine it and reimage it. And the students and I are co-researchers to create and teach others. So they are a part of this work. They know they're researchers, and we're trying to figure out a different way to look at textiles and to use them as teaching tools and manipulatives in the classroom to find and connect with our place on the land. Next slide, please. Here are some images of the research we've done to date. So we've walked out on the land in different places in our community, and also we went to Hillside, our outdoor ed center as well. And I had the students sketching in different spaces in the class in our school, on our school property. And then we started to look at, it's graduated from how can we connect their place to their place on the land. They're looking at shadow and how shadow and light show us our place on the land, and the sidewalk cracks. They're measuring how many sidewalk cracks are also on the land. So in the bottom right, you can see that there are some textiles the children are working with. I got in contact with an alteration company in our area, and I asked them for their cutoffs that would end up probably being thrown out or put into a landfill if they would donate them. And they very generously gave us a whole lot. So we are now working with those and mapping out our community. Next slide, please. Here the children are making their own, to get them to the point where we figured out we needed an opportunity for them to show their place on the land and their connection on the land. So they've drawn that, and then they've used textiles to represent where their place is on the land. And they're doing that with different pieces. If you can see, they're just cut up pieces and different wool, different found items that would be considered textiles. And they're gluing them on the paper. And then also we've planned a larger map for the community. Next slide, please. And I'll finish with the textiles. At this point, we haven't done all our data collection because the children are still working, and I'm working alongside them to document their learning. That what I've realized at this point is that the textiles are furthering the language of their connection to their place on the land. So they're starting to now talk about their emotions. And Maria, you spoke about that earlier. They are making connections to the land and their place on the land when they're using the materials and mapping it out. They're expressing themselves and their connection to the land and how that makes them feel. I look forward to sharing all the whole project later. We're still at the point where I'm following the students and we're working together. So I'm watching them and working with them. And they are, you can see there's in the middle, there's stop signs and different things. They're creating textile maps, pieces on the map from textiles, and then we're going to sew it onto the bigger map of the textiles that you saw that were cut-offs from the alteration company. So they are creating their own place in space and connection to their land through the language of textiles. They had the language of their place, their connection, orally, and they drew pictures of that as well. But now they're starting to talk about with the textiles, there is, and I still have to code some of the language, they're using emotion with it. Okay, so that's where I'm at with the project to this point. Okay. Oh, I think there's one more slide. Sorry. My key takeaways, sorry. Climate Camp was instrumental in the work I have done this year. It gave me the courage to step up and out to where I am uncomfortable. I shared previous work with the TDSB ESL department because I was part of this, the Climate Camp. It gave me courage to speak up and out about another project that we had done last year. And I shared it with the whole ESL department. And that is all of our itinerant teachers who go out to schools in the ESL and TDSB. And they received that quite amazingly. And then I have other projects on the go, and I'm here sharing, because I think that in order for us to continue to do this work, we have to have a forum to share. And I would highly recommend you go to Climate Camp, because it really does change you. It really did. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Trish. I really appreciated what you had to say. And I liked how you framed it all at the beginning with this idea of nourishment, and thinking about how important that is for all of us as educators to make sure that we are able to nourish ourselves in order to be able to facilitate this kind of learning for our students, right? And how wonderful that project is to help students recognize and articulate the connections and the relationships that they have with land. So thank you for sharing that today. Next, we're going to hear from teacher Maria Bettas-Protopapas. Maria has an undergrad in French and biology. She's been teaching for 26 years. She has a lot of experience that includes special education, French at the intermediate and junior levels, and currently she's teaching grade 6 French immersion at Adam Beck Junior Public School. So I'm going to invite Maria to tell us a little bit about what's happening at the junior level.
Hi, everyone. Just like Trish, I tend to get really emotional about Climate Camp. Chris, if you could go to the next slide. I want to say thank you to my friend Andrea, who's in the webinar listening, for strongly encouraging me to go to Climate Camp. It is true, it did change me. It, in fact, reinvigorated and reignited the importance of climate action for me as an educator. When I came away, I was inspired to reintegrate or put more emphasis on the Indigenous ways of knowing and learning from the land. Having Dan Longboat there was like a very emotional and amazing experience. It encouraged me to think more about student discovery and inquiry. to involve activities that integrate science and nature, to spend time in nature, outdoor lessons, and to just get outside of the classroom. So throughout the year, I added a climate action education thread to my grade 6 French immersion long range plans and the units throughout the year. And I'm actually blessed that I not only teach French to my class, but I'm also their English teacher. So it gave me a little bit more breadth and depth that we could go into, especially because some of the French climate change resources are kind of lacking. That's a different webinar. And I was also inspired at school. I renamed our eco clubs. It's now called Climate Action Team. And last year we were a participant, and this year I'm hoping that we are on our way to being a gold, but we shall see what the assessors say. If you could go to the next slide, Chris. So I too was part of the climate literacy leadership program with OISE and TDSB, and my inquiry was, how do I develop my students' awareness, of how their consumer habits are contributing to climate change because of the neighborhood where I live. The students are very privileged, and I think some of them may not actually know how much. So we started by looking at the UN sustainability goals, and we had it took me longer than I thought for a pre-teaching activity, because we spent about 2 days organizing them into categories. Then we did a Minds On activity where I gave them a set of cards, and they had to discuss what their wants and their needs were. And again, very rich conversation. Do you need a 4,000 square foot house? What do you need for housing? Things like that. Then I found the video called The Story of Stuff, available in French and in English on YouTube, that we watched, that talks about, it's about 20 minutes, a little bit longer, that talks about how stuff becomes what it is. And after that, Maria talked, just like Maria had talked about, the kids had a lot of emotions. Some of them were really angry. Some of them were really sad about that one bag of stuff that you put out as garbage at the end of the week, actually along the way has created so much more. So some of them had some really strong emotions. So I asked them what they wanted to do, kind of left it open-ended, which again, I took a leap as an educator, what they wanted to do. And a lot of them decided to create infographics, because we'd already done it, about different ecological or climate action topics, because they wanted to try and inform other kids in the school. And then some kids, as an extension, are going to be completing the life cycle of our product assignment. Because some of them have really been inspired about this, and they're actually looking at statistics about how much does electronic waste, for example, contribute to climate change and what have you. And can we go to the next slide, please, Chris? So these are blurry, I'm sorry, but it says 3 examples of infographics that some of my students have done: the overproduction and how to help, greenwashing, midnight shopaholics, which basically is about how people shop all the time and how Amazon sends us little things in these huge packages, and how it's contributing to climate change. Next slide, Chris, please. And I guess my key overall takeaways, there's 3. I learned this year that students are interested in climate change education topics, and that they actually surprised me by all of the information and things that they already knew. And they also kind of inspired me on a different level about their willingness to actually learn more. This year also gave me hope, so where I get emotional, that my students are perhaps going to be change makers as they move on through the education system, which is kind of cool. And Climate Camp was an amazing experience and has benefited myself and my classroom highly. And I recommend everybody going. I will be there as an alumni this summer, and I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think I love that sort of iterative experience of giving hope to the students and then also having them give you hope as well as a teacher. And just I think what you shared also highlights some of the pedagogies that can really support climate justice education and in terms of like inquiry and having students really explore things that they find important and interesting. So thanks for sharing that. Lastly, we're going to hear from Nasreen Khan. Nasreen has worked in both elementary and secondary schools. She's been working with TDSB since 2005, and currently Nasreen is teaching at Cedar Brae Collegiate Institute. And I believe, Nasreen, you're going to be sharing a little bit about some of the learning that's happening with your grade 9 students, so at the secondary level. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a kind introduction. I was also one of those fortunate people whose paths crossed with the highly devoted group of individuals, and by that I mean the organizers of August Climate Camp 2024 and the Climate Literacy and Leadership Program. I really feel that anyone who would be joining them will definitely have that change, not only in their own personal lives, but definitely in their professional life. And you can see what Trish and Maria have said, and they have really elaborated in detail on how environmental education and indigenous ways of living are closely braided together as both emphasize deep relationships with the land, sustainability, and interconnectivity. My journey started with the book actually many years ago, and this is the book. This is Rethinking Columbus, the Next 500 Years. And this book was published in 1998. And you can see this beautiful picture. This is a picture of a dancer, and I believe it's taken in Minnesota, 1996. Beautiful book. I deeply recommend it. The good thing is that this book now has another edition, and that is coming with handouts, lesson plans, and much more for the teachers. And I believe it was published in 2003. Do recommend it deeply. As Maria and Trish pointed out, on how the climate camp inspired us to continue this journey to our learnings with the Climate Literacy and Leadership Program team, I designed a project for my grade 9 students, starting with an inquiry question. And inquiry question, you can see it on the screen. How can I develop a climate-focused inquiry experience for grade 9 students to respond to community strengths, challenges, and solutions? Pretty broad question, but looks like early in February, because Cedar Brae is a semester school. So although we started working with our beautiful team back pretty much many months back, or rather I would say in the last few months of 2024, but it was only early in February this year that I was standing in front of my grade 9 students thinking about how I would bring in the climate-focused experiences to this very quiet group. The air in the room started to freshen up as I introduced the self-exploration lessons and grounding techniques through mindful learning and living. The group, believe me, was very quiet. Everyone, there would be a pin drop silence every day in my classroom. But thank God, because of the self-exploration lessons that I have learned back at the camp and doing the LMP, CLIP meetings, I was able to cheer them up. Students were just practicing and focusing on self, surroundings, and the goals they have for their successful living. The transformation in student attitude started to take place. Yeah. And you can see in our identities, that's how we did it. It was through storytelling, through talking to others. And we moved on from self to others. students created beautiful flat lace art, usually using their value items. You can see it in these pictures. And you can tell their personality as well, appreciating these pictures of art. That flat lace activity opened rich conversations among them, and they walked from one sentence to another, leaving with sizzling facts about their fears. That activity opened up a venue full of laughter, excitement, and connection with each other. Students joyfully shared their experiences, their stories, and opened up their doors to get into know each other. So I saw right after that there was a kind of environment we love, and it felt more human than robotic and administrative. And finally, my students were ready for this time, and I will share that on the next slide. They were ready with their innovative selves out on Turtle Island. Yeah, exactly. So I introduced them to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We focused on the climate initiatives. We looked at the climate injustices in the world around them. And as you can see that there's a question. And the question is, how do you expect me to learn anything when you are the one who is asking all the questions? So what I did was not ask questions that come from, the students, their genuine curiosity, questions that originate from their confusion about the world, not mine, questions that invite deep thinking and arouse meta cognition, prompting them to reflect on their own thinking, not mine. Learning is not having experience of something. It's rather our reflecting on our experiences, right? So that's what it was happening. Instead of me giving them questions, they were actually the owners of their learning. They were digging deeper, and they were looking into thinking about their thinking. And during those moments when they, and I'm referring to my students, were drowning in the data that they collected, or you may say the information that they gained, it deepened the interconnectedness to the various components of their infinite body. And that is on the next slide. And those inquiry projects were about the systemic injustices. You can see that the deep scars of colonization that they finally say where, and that authentic learning started to emerge in the form of a question that really matters. And now, if you can see the major components of this inquiry method that I have used, in that the class divided itself based on affinity. I really believe that it is very important to have the students choose their partners, but I was impressed when the students were able to take friends who they believe would not be of their capacity or ability. It was a really beautiful way of welcoming other friends, other class fellows. And it focused on topics of their choice, not mine. No doubt the students came up with questions bigger than life itself, and they learned how to write their thesis statements. They were able to create meaningful questions, and by then, no doubt, the burden of all the knowledge that the groups have accumulated on their shoulders was released to writing essays about this topic. And I saw that right away, because it looked like as if they have put all those points together that they have accumulated as a group. And now when everyone wrote their essay in their own way, in the way that they would like to express, looks like everyone sat back and enjoyed each other's essays. It was really, really funny to see how all that came along. And all is well. I always believe that all is well that ends well. So, and it was a beautiful March day when I saw the posters with my student inquiry question, the background information on their stakeholders and why we care about it. And there's practical solutions as well. And I would like to say the next slide, please. I saw how the understanding of the concept, sacred relationship of indigenous people, the land has been enriched. And one of our favorite activities was being deeply involved in watching the videos in indigenous environmental justice, share the lived experiences of indigenous people, and to enable a vision of justice that supports the consciousness of life. The story of Tani Wanjak, and I really want to share that as well. The story and the residential schools, this story and the residential schools, we really explored it very well, and it echoed loud and clear. Another thing that I want to share before I move on is that this book that is a practical guide to inquiry-based learning. I will try to put all these links in the chat box now. So in this slide, you can clearly see, not clearly, a glimpse of my students' work. They diligently followed the indigenous ways of sharing knowledge and work their team. And that's why I put that caption. There's no I in the team. Our client initiative ending by creating prototypes. And what was that? They created prototypes of apps as solutions to their problems. You might have noticed that their personality in those pictures, the phone was quite a significant part of they being the person. So we used the MIT App Inventor and we all created apps. For example, the team, you can see, working on affordable and clean energy, found a digital solution titled Earth's Power, which is an app that will promote affordable and clean energy to the environment and boosting a sustainable community, fostering quality life for everyone. The app is doing several features to achieve affordable and clean energy. So almost every group created apps. We are still working on it. They are not finished. At the end, as a whole, if I think about what I have learned, the whole project brings our focus back to having the gratitude for the connectedness, the spirituality Mother Earth can provide. I'm again grateful to the summer gathering that helped me connect with nature. Now I teach patience. Now I teach trust, because nature operates according to its own rhythms. Seasons change, plants grow, animals evolve, without rushing or forcing the pace. Everything happens when the time is right. Rather than stressing or trying to control outcomes, we can learn to allow things unfold in their own time. That is exactly what environmental awareness is. The flow is the harmony. Nature doesn't struggle against time or soul. It operates in harmony with the life. I just want to make sure that when I went to the summer camp and how I am now, it's huge difference. I'm much calm. I'm much happy.
Thank you so much, Nasreen. Like what stands out to me from that is just like how important it is for our students to be known by us, and really how that can guide the really important relational work that we do with our students. And I see Maria's added into the chat this idea of moving from teaching from control, or even like our control over the more than human world to something that's more coherent, right? And focusing on those interrelationships and interconnectedness. So thank you for sharing that. So, I mean, all three of these teachers have shared some examples of some of the great work that's come out of their learning experiences, both at Climate Camp and then as part of the Climate Literacy and Leadership Program or the Action Research Team. And I can share, I'll put the link in the chat for the Climate Literacies and Leadership Program specifically. There are a few examples on there from last year of other projects that teachers have engaged with in terms of climate change education, climate justice education. There will be a few more added in the coming weeks as well as teachers share a summary of what they've been doing in their classrooms. We do have a little bit of time now if there are questions for any of our speakers. And then I will also, maybe I'll just do that. I'll highlight it now while we have the slide up here. We do have two upcoming events. One that will kind of round out the academic year in June. On June 4th, we are having a Cultivating Connections event at Gled Hill Junior Public School, which is near Woodbine Station, TTC station in East York. That's going to be a celebration for eco schools, and in particular Gled Hill. It's their 20th anniversary of being an eco school, so we are hosting it there for an evening event, and we would love to have you join. I'll post the registration for that in the chat as well. And then, of course, Climate Camp, we're doing it again. So the second year of Climate Camp is happening in August. You'll see the dates there, August 18th to the 21st, back at Mono Cliffs Outdoor Education Center. There will be one of those days, August 20th, when Climate Camp alum are invited back to join and we'll all gather together. But the Climate Camp registration is open, and we will, I'll put the link to apply for that in the chat as well. So these are two things that hopefully you'll consider joining us for. So now that I've shared those, I think we have about 10 minutes. We'll wrap up at 5. If there are questions from anybody here in the Zoom space, you're welcome to unmute to ask any of the teachers or speakers today, or you could put your question in the chat.
Yeah, I saw a chat from Sarah about transportation, and we do have a carpooling arrangement. So we had a number of teachers who weren't able to drive up, and we were able to coordinate and make sure that all teachers who wanted to be there were able to get there through carpooling.
I see another.
My question is for Maria.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yes, so Maria, as a French teacher, grade 6 French immersion teacher, how did you manage to incorporate that into your classroom?
So I was blessed because I also teach my students English along with French immersion. So we did a lot of the work in English class.
I'm just asking, so there's no, I'm asking because as a French teacher, I would like to get into that, but how can I?
To be honest, we've had discussions, but if you actually want them to do research and whatnot, it's complicated because a lot of the research and resources are created for students who are French first language. So, I mean, I found that difficult as well. If I hadn't been able to teach them in English because I taught them English, it would have been harder for me. Next year, my assignment's changing, and I won't be teaching my own English, so I'm going to have to muddle my way through it. But definitely we've talked about that as Climate Camp alumni, that we need to develop a list of like French immersion friendly resources as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, I just wanted to ask, because I think with the National Climate Course, I don't remember if you're involved in that, but I think that there was someone on the team who developed a list of resources. Do you remember that?
It might have been coordinated by Marie Tremblay, so I can follow up to find out.
Yeah, because I know that I think she had gotten involved in doing that, because that was something she was passionate about as well. So I know that there was some work that was done. It'd be great to be able to get it to some of the folks here who are interested.
Yes, I'll follow up on that for everyone, so everyone knows. I'll follow up from this webinar today with a recording link. So if you want to view this again, and also a list of resources. So if I'm able to track down some of those French language resources, or if there's any kind of collection of resources, I'll pass that along as well.
Thank
I
you,
might be
Sarah.
able to, I might also have some resources too from the geography teachers. They had a community of teachers that would work on climate change education as well. And they had some good sites that they would use and lessons that they created as well.
Great.
So I'll share that with you as well, Sarah.
Brilliant.
I wondered if I could pick on Andrea to share some of her experiences because I know she was very passionate and involved. Andrea, do you mind if I put you on the spot if you're there, if you haven't stepped away?
I'm so sorry. I don't mind speaking, and I apologize for my multitasking and while I'm off camera. I do you want me to talk about like climate camp? Because I have a good question to put out to the teachers that they can maybe speak about. That would be a question that teachers might want to use when they're talking to their colleagues or even their administration about justifying why the climate change education is important. But what are some sort of like wisdom or nuggets that you have about assessment, whether like you could use some of these like climate change projects that you're doing to assess even the learning skills of your elementary students, because I know that for some kids this is a great way to get them engaged in group work, and you could talk about their collaboration or their initiative, right? Like it's all like climate action initiative would be a great way to measure that in their learning skills, but also in terms of like helping kids with their self-assessment, and like measuring how they're conscious of their impact on the world, because I know the sustainable global goals, those started in 2015. I started working a lot with them in like 2017, 2018, and now I'm like, okay, we're in 2025. We're like 5 years away from the end of that program, and like, where have we seen big gains, and where have we seen like where we're pretty stagnant and complacent on that? So that was just a thought I had. So if any of the teachers want to jump in and say something about assessment, I think that would be a great thing to close with. What do you think, Maria?
Oh yeah, sounds good.
Sorry, Maria, I interrupted you. I was gonna say, as a grade 6 teacher, everything I did, I assessed. Learning skills, their infographics were part of language. But it also helped us build a class community as well, right? Getting to figure out a problem and solve things and talk about it, talk about our emotions. So while assessments is important, it also helped us come together as a learning classroom and community, and be leaders in the building in our climate action team as well.
If I may, one of the things that's amazing about when you work in this way, it's very holistic. And so it's very interconnected. So not unlike a tapestry, it's woven together. And if you actually go into the curriculum and you look at all the areas that my class has covered with this project, it's connected to science, technology, engineering, arts, math, medicine, and design. The medicine being that the students are connected to the land, they're incorporating Indigenous perspectives, understanding that we are not better than the creatures that are on the land, and that Mother Earth comes first, and we have to build and give back. So we're not contributing to, we're actually saving. We're not, this is not going into a landfill. So it's a real concrete example of it. But if you look at the textile mapping that they do, even just looking at perimeter area and shapes, them having to measure how much they're tiling on that space and putting in the area and mapping, there's coordinates. Honestly, if you take that, you go into the project, any project you're going to do in this way, and you go into the curriculum, you can pull out many different things that the students are covering, and then get them to evaluate what are they doing. So I know I am using area and measuring area when I do this. So you're using success criteria, but it's done after they've done the work. So it's a bit of a different way to look at assessment. The project comes first, and then you unweave going back into the curriculum and get the students to actually realize all the work that they're doing And then this will be shared with the parents at the end of the year. So they will see all the different things the students have done, and they will have done their evaluations and their success criteria with that as part of their portfolio work.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Just for time, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for those questions. Thanks for joining today. Special thanks to Maria Vamvalis and our 3 teachers, Trish, Maria, and Nasreen, for sharing about your experiences. Really appreciate your willingness to share a little bit about what you're doing with your students. So looking forward to connecting with some of you again on June 4th in 2 weeks at Glad Hill for the Cultivating Connections event, and maybe meeting some of you at Climate Camp in August. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.